What is up, everybody? Welcome to today's YouTube video where What's up, everyone? So glad you're here. I'm so glad. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to color correct a video when you're colorblind, specifically in Final Cut Pro. I'll walk you through just a couple clips, how to use the tools that are integrated within Final Cut Pro. It has everything you need. This is useful if you're not colorblind, but especially if you are colorblind, you can rely heavily on those tools to get you in a good spot. This is something I personally struggle with because I'm colorblind. The camera angle is going to switch a little bit. I have to use my FaceTime camera on my desktop because unfortunately I cannot get my Sony camera to work as a webcam right now. But I hope you guys don't mind, and let's get right into it.
Okay, welcome guys. So we have Final Cut Pro 10 open here. That is the editing software I use, if you do not know that. What's really great about Final Cut Pro 10 is they have so many intuitive tools inside the software already. You don't have to use plugins, you don't have to use this, that, and the other, and it just makes it so easy. So today, like I said, we will be looking at how to color correct if you're colorblind, like me. I am colorblind, and this is something I struggle with to the ends of the earth. If I could hire an editor, if I could hire a full-time color person, I would. But until then, I have to make it work. And so I've looked up other YouTubers and other resources that help me do this, and the best way to do it is just using the tools Final Cut Pro gives you and knowing how to read them. So it should be pretty quick today. I have two clips in here that I dropped, just two drone shots that I've taken over the years working on some other projects. So we are going to color each one of these separately, and then I'll let you know some tricks along the way. So I pulled these two clips just down in the timeline. We're going to get rid of this panel because we don't really need it, and we're actually going to hit Command 7 on our keyboard, and that will bring up these tools. So here we have a vector scope and an RGB overlay. You can change these, you can change the view of them, how they're laid out, and you can actually change what you're seeing. You could do histogram, waveform, all that. So I personally have found this vector scope, which shows me where skin tone line is and how much of each tone is in the image, is super helpful. And then down here is where you're going to set your white balance, this RGB overlay, and that's going to give you a good idea of where your white balance lays. Now over here is the actual color panel. So here's the video icon about the clip that's selected. This little triangle will take you to the color. So right now it defaults you to what you call a color board, and if I made any sort of adjustments on here, it would start to show up. So color boards look confusing. My favorite to use are the color wheels, and this breaks down your global. This would be overall. Then your shadows are separate here, and you can adjust the tint, the saturation, and exposure of your shadows. Same with highlights, and then your midtones. So it breaks it down. If you scroll down, you'll see temperature, tint, hue. I actually don't touch any of this down here. So really what I'm looking for, I always start highlights, and then I go shadows, and then I go midtones. So what I'm looking for is over here, when I'm adjusting these, this is the layout of the colors in my image. So you can see where over here, it's a lot of trees and one color type situation. You don't have a lot of activity here. When you start getting right into this really bright, the really bright spot where the water tower comes in, you start to get these really high peaks. And so the top of your image, the top of your overlay here is going to be your highlights. So it gets really bright because this is white, and the bottom of this overlay is your shadows, and then midtones are everything in between. So our goal to set our white balance is to get, usually I'll say, is to get this red, green, and blue lines all to match. And when they overlay each other, that's what creates this white. So you can see, I'll start messing with the highlights. You can see the top of this overlay is going to go crazy when I just spin this highlight. So it's pretty sensitive. And then you can obviously see it in the image. Well, for colorblind people, speaking for myself and others like me, if you're not, this will be helpful to understand. Just these fractional movements right here, I cannot even tell just by looking at the image, doing this little circle, I cannot even tell the image is changing. I can tell a little bit right here, but my eyes can't differentiate between those different colors that it's cycling through. That is why these tools are so helpful. So I can essentially color correct this video without ever actually looking at the video, and I'm just going to trust my tools 100% of the time. So I'm going to take these highlights and I'm going to do my best to make sure, and because I'm setting white balance, I have a white image, a white object, in the video. That's what I'm going to try and overlap over here to make white. So as you can see, that's really warm, and the green is dominating, and the red. So I'm just gonna move this circle around until I see a lot of overlap. So right there looks pretty good, and then I can take a look at my image and say, okay, that looks decent. Now it's a little offset over here, but you got to remember the sky is over here, which is predominantly blue. So your blue's gonna hover. You have a ton of trees, which is brown and green. So your green's gonna dominate. So you can't try and get everything aligned. If we aligned the sky in the blue, then our greens and warm tones really dominate the rest. So if that's a look you're going for, great. But I'm just trying to set my white balance to get an accurate color scale here. So I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up my highlights. So a general rule of thumb is you don't ever want to go over 100. You start to get overexposed when you get that. And overexposed and underexposed essentially just means you start to lose detail in the image, because if you overexpose, it means your highlights are too bright, you lose details. If you underexpose, it means your shadows are, well, I guess underexpose your shadows are too dark, you lose details. So bring the highlights up to around 100. Sometimes you can, you got some strays coming over 100. That's probably okay. Some people like live and die by the 100. So anyway, we'll take highlights up a little bit. You may, as you mess with each measurement, you may have to go back and adjust some things here and there. So now I'm going to move to the shadows, which is the bottom of this histogram. I'm sorry, I keep calling it a histogram. It's an overlay. And the shadows looked pretty good where they were. There's some shadows over here, so in this part of the image. So on the left side of the image, I'm going to try and make sure those are not too blue, not too green. Right there looks decent. I'm going to lower these a lot, and you can already see the contrast that gives us. And then just like the highlights, the rule of thumb is kind of don't go past that 100 mark. Same for shadows, except don't go past the 0 mark. So you can already tell if I click this on and off what a difference that's made. It's brightened our image, it's added contrast. And then just as a detail thing, I like to drag the midtones down. You can see it even adds a little more contrast. We don't have any skin tones here, but if we did, this is where I go to the vector scope. And when I move my midtones around, this line right here is telling me where your skin tone is. And so you'd throw that center, if you get crazy with it. It's all these are really sensitive. So minor adjustments will usually do the trick. You can double click on any of these to reset them. Again, I'm not too worried about my midtones in here. I could make them just like a little warmer. This was shot in the summer, so I could just pull it like a little left, and or actually summer fall. So I can make the overall image a little warmer. So I can see my highlights need a tad bit adjusted again, and there you go. So now that's decent. That's definitely better than the original. the next thing and last thing I will do for this basic color correction, I'm going to click this down arrow and I'm going to add a hue saturation curve. So this is another tool. So my color wheels are there, my hue saturation curves here. I'm going to go down to saturation versus saturation, which is basically just dealing with all the saturation in the image. And I'm going to pull that thing up, and you can see as I pull it up, more color is introduced into the image. I don't go crazy with it. You don't want to oversaturate things and look fake. But I do like to pull that up. And then actually a little trick I learned is if you click on this right side of the image, of the graph, this side is representing your most saturated parts of your image. This side is your least saturated. So what you can do is you can pull the overall saturation really high, or just to where you might want it. And then you can just dip this side down ever so slightly. And what that does is it takes your most saturated part of the clip and it just brings the saturation down a hair on that. So everything else can be saturated well, but if I thought, for instance, it's probably the trees here, if I thought the trees were too saturated, I don't have to get rid of the saturation on everything else. It's almost like a select tool and you can pull that down. So now we can go to effects, and if we get rid of all the effects, it gets rid of the color, and you can see the contrast, the before and after. So let's do one more. I don't want this video to carry on too long, but let's do one more clip so you guys can see, this again. So I'm gonna click over here, and we're gonna color correct this image. So same exact thing. We're gonna click back over to our color, add color wheels. Let's get a better look at this. Now this is crazy because all these stadium seats, you can see how dense and stuff it is. So I'm going to take the highlights up, make it a little bit brighter. The color on this, the white balance is like fine. So these aren't like really dramatic examples, I guess, but shadows, you can see, I'll pull shadows down. Ooh, that's looking crispy. I'm liking that. Midtones pulled down a little bit. Go even further down with my shadows, I think. And quick comparison, that's already way better. Let's go add our hue and saturation, which is just saturation for me usually. So you can see like way too saturated, the grass goes crazy. But if I throw that saturation up, and then get some lines in here, just ease that down a hair. Now it's not so dramatic. There's before saturation, after saturation. Maybe it's a bit dramatic. And there you have it. So there's the second clip. Color wheel, hue saturation curves. That's all I use when I color correct images. Now, if I had a whole sequence of shots, these two are completely unrelated, but if I had a whole sequence of shots that were, if I was filming a wedding or something like that, what you can do is throw on something like you download like a basic correction. You throw this over the top, and then instead of going each clip by clip, if it's a long video, have a ton of clips, you can actually just throw these color corrections right on top of this base correction layer, and it'll apply it to everything that's under it. And that is super, super handy when you're dealing with multiple clips and coloring a lot the same exact way. You can also do just your Command C for copy and then Command Shift V to paste the attributes onto the other clip. So there's multiple ways you can get the same edits, the same effects, the same coloring from one to another after you do one. But I like this basic correction a lot because that allows me just to skip from one to the other. So anyway, I'm going to give you guys one more look. I'm going to hit Command 7 again. So now we have a little bit bigger image. This is, sorry, let me select this, get rid of my base correction. This is a look at a before and an after. Before, after, same thing with this clip. a before and after. Guys, if you have tips or questions or anything like that as you watch this, please in the comments let me know. Hit me up. I would love to chat about it, answer your questions the best that I could. If you have other ways that even make it easier or suggestions, if you're watching this and you're not colorblind and you're just like, hey, that doesn't look great, you should do this instead. Perfect. I'm here to learn as much as you guys, but I am also just passing along skills and tips and tricks that I have learned along my way into the media space. So there you have it. I'm going to kick it back to the outro, but that in a nutshell is how to color correct if you're colorblind. Use those tools, use your resources. Again, Command 7 brings up those graphs for you, and you can choose what you like. But the vector scope, the RGB overlay, your color wheel, and your hue saturation curves are the 4 simple items that I use to color correct my videos before I do anything. From there, if you're going for certain looks, you can add LUTs, or you can even shoot in certain picture profiles that allow this process to be even easier. There's a picture profile I shoot for weddings that then have custom LUTs associated that will essentially do all this for me, plus add like a specific look. So all those are really, really great options, but if you're just looking for basic color correction and you're colorblind like me, use these tools. It will help immensely. So let's kick it to the outro. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining me today, guys. I'm so glad that you were here. Let me know in the comments if you liked the video. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this and others. As always, I hope this video served you well, and I will see you in the next one. Just a FaceTime. Come on, sure. Man, I am really bad at intros and outros. So bad. Ugh. I have like 1 million outtakes per. I just sit here repeating myself, and I get to the same spot, and I just say, It's brutal. Absolutely brutal. Behind the scenes. Thanks for watching.